He kicked off his broadcasting career in Miami. He's wrapping it up here in Myrtle Beach. Stay tuned. You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Myrtle Beach Herald at Myrtle Square Mall. We're visiting with Steve Porter. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for getting in.
Well, thank you for inviting me this hour of the morning.
Absolutely. It's so exciting to think it's been this long. I've been wanting to get you in, and of course you're so busy in the mornings, obviously. 6 to 10 you're kind of tied up, so
right.
it's great to be able to break your way a little earlier on. How long have you been in Myrtle Beach, Steve?
Well, it depends on how you define being here. I first started coming here, my first visit here was on old, Piedmont Airlines on a DC-3 that came here to visit my fiance's family who were here in the summer of 1959. So that was my first visit here. And then we got married in 62 up in Kannapolis, North Carolina.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. And then years after that, we came here 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, I think we hit every old rooming house on North Myrtle Beach over all those years. And then finally, we purchased our condominium here at Maison Sommaire up on Shore Drive in 1976. And then I finally, more or less, retired out of Washington and New York and came here permanently in 1995. So it's 95 I've been here permanent.
Right.
But I've been here in the sense that I've been able to watch and see and participate in this phenomenal community, ever since 1959.
For more than 4 decades.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you have, when folks say I'm a local, I grew up in Myrtle Beach, you've essentially seen it from a local's perspective.
Absolutely. Been here coming since I was 19 years old. So what can I say?
I had no idea. That's amazing. I always thought of just that 8-year experience. And so the Maison Sommaire location you've been in, you said since 76?
76, yeah. We were one of the first purchasers. The building was still being built when we purchased there.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We still got it. Yeah.
Where did you grow up, Steve?
I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. Born into a family of merchants and politicians, and it's a wonder I came out straight from that group. And finished out high school there. And the day I graduated, the day after I graduated from high school, the moving van was in the driveway, and we moved to Florida. So then I went to the University of, the St. Petersburg College there, and they just happened to be the headquarters of the educational television station. And I got involved in that. I helped put it together, and you know how you do early when you start up a television station, you paint flats, you run cameras, you direct, did all this stuff.
Everything, yes.
And so that was a rare opportunity because we had all those facilities right on campus. And then I went on to the University of Miami, and then actually really got my first hard-nosed, full-time work in Miami, and was there during college.
How exciting, though, being involved in a startup there for the startup of that station.
Yeah, it was. You spend a lot of your time with a soldering gun and a paintbrush. It's not very glamorous.
Yeah, sure.
But and then after that, that's where I really got the bug, so to speak. And then went on at the University of Miami. I right away was hired by the biggest radio station in town. And at 20 years old, I was anchoring a 4-hour news block in the evening.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
In Miami?
In Miami. Radio Miami it was called. And then that was at WGBS. Then I went over to INZ, and was their evening newscaster. Of course, I'm going to college all this time.
Right, I'm trying to think, how are you doing that? Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep, but I know a lot of my notes in class would just kind of run down off the edge of the page. But, that was fun. My roommates were all out partying and having a ball, and I was coming home at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. They were all studying, and here I come dragging in, But it was what I wanted to do. And I got to cover a lot of big stories as a young man there, particularly the Cuban community that was being created by the influx from Castro's takeover in Cuba. Went down to Cuba a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, came the Bay of Pigs invasion. I was there during the work up to that, and a lot of the stories we covered during that period were stories of what I guess people today call refugees, but I mean these were people that were determined to go back to Cuba, and they were making bombs and rockets and things in their backyards and blowing themselves up in the process. The White House, of course, was supposedly behind this whole operation. And as you'll recall, the CIA was supposedly involved and had created a very small fleet of aircraft. And they were flying them in and out of the Opa-locka Airport, which is an adjunct to the main airport there in Miami, without lights, driving the controllers at Miami International crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of stupid things were done. That Bay of Pigs thing was absolutely one of the most embarrassing things this country ever got in. And then, you know, they pulled out at the last minute and left a lot of people hanging. And then, of course, came the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I had gotten married at that time. Right about that time, we had gotten married. That was in fact, that was just a couple of months afterwards. And I forget the boss saying, well, if the missile starts flying, who's going to stay? And everybody said, not me. And my wife had already packed the trunk of the car with canned goods. We were ready to go at a moment's notice.
Wow.
So no, I'm not a very good nuclear war frontline reporter.
But you were still, think about that, in your early 20s, getting into the real meat of things. I mean, you were a kid. You were a youngster. How did you understand the significance of what was going on?
I guess it's just something I always wanted to do. And my heroes in those days were David Brinkley and Chet Huntley, and I'm trying to think of Ron Cochran, who's nobody can remember. Peter Jennings, by the way, was just a year later became the anchor of ABC television news. He was my age, 22 years old. You may not remember, but he was the network anchor for ABC News at 22. So I didn't consider myself to be that young or unusual.
I guess you didn't. You didn't. But I think it was just a couple years later. I think I saw in reading about you, Steve, that it was age 22 that you were the...
Yeah, I became news director up in Tampa then of WFLA. That was the NBC affiliate.
Right, and still is.
Yeah, it's a big one. I made a lot of very close friends. They're like family to me, even now. And then I co-anchored the evening news there with Arch Deal. And some of you may remember Arch. He's the guy that jumped out of an airplane. His parachute didn't open, and he landed in Orange Grove, and he's still doing television in Tampa.
No.
Oh, yeah.
You are kidding.
I'm not kidding you. You couldn't kill that guy.
Is he still at FLA?
I don't know whether he's still there or maybe someplace else, but I know he's still in the business.
Now, was FLA teamed with the Tampa Tribune then?
Yes, that was when the newspaper owned them, and then came all the antitrust stuff, and
they're still co-owned.
Are they still co-owned?
Who owns WBTW and the Florence Morning News co-owns the Tampa
I was wondering where it all had wound up.
They're still together. Yeah.
But I had one hero there. He was the general manager. At the time, his name was John Alexander, who, after I had gone to NBC in New York, they had a big bash at the skating rink, big anniversary party. This guy taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around and I look up, and my God, I hadn't seen him for 15 or 20 years. There's old John, you know? And it was like meeting your uncle. After that many years, it was wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Those were wonderful people there.
Just that excitement. Of course. Now, do you still have family in Florida?
Yeah, my brother is a physician in Sarasota. He's been there many, many years. And my dad lived there for a long time. That's about it. Most of the rest of my family is spread from coast to coast. We're we're an airplane kind of family.
Aha, yes. I think I saw that you were a private instrument-rated pilot.
Yeah. I always wanted to be a pilot, and actually, when I got my letter for my exam to go into the service, I just said, well, I might as well go ahead and get it at Uncle Sam's expense. So went and got did the mental and the physical and everything, and then they dragged me out of line and said, "You go over there and see that sergeant over there in the corner." So I go over, and there's this mean-looking guy, and he looks at me and he says, "What are you planning to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about joining the Air Force." And he says, "You ain't joining nothing." He said, "You couldn't even get through basic training. Pick up your stuff and get what out of here." And he just treated me like dirt. Well, it turns out I had been injured in high school. And apparently it was a kind of injury they didn't want. He actually said to me that if we take you, we're going to wind up paying you disability the rest of your life, and you're not worth it.
Oh, no.
So just go home.
He told you that?
Yes, he did. So I picked up and left. But still, that didn't... All my friends in high school had joined the Air Force. Many of them had gone to Vietnam. And I wanted to learn to fly. So what I wound up doing is after I left Tampa, I was hired in San Antonio to do this 2-hour morning program. And, of course, San Antonio has Randolph Air Force Base, Kelly Air Force Base, Lackland Air Force Base, Brooke Army Medical Center, the Fort Sam Houston, and I can't remember the NASA installation out there. So a lot of our news, as you know, in a local market, if you have that was literally our industry, was the military there, the tourist industry,
like Fort Bragg or Fayetteville.
Sure. So what happened was every time there was a story that involved the military, I jumped at it.
Oh yeah.
So I wound up flying in just about everything they had.
No.
Everything from T-28s. That's where they trained the Vietnamese pilots, by the way.
Huh.
So I got to ride in the back end of a lot of T-28s, which they used to call them Maytag washing machines, because that's what they sounded like.
Oh, God.
Old World War II vintage aircraft. That's what they trained them in. So I had a lot of that flying, and a lot of traveling around in everything from those old-fashioned boxcars to jets to F-5s to every kind of helicopter, every kind of medevac aircraft you could possibly think of. I jumped at that opportunity just to get out there and fly, and did a lot of. In fact, I did so much of that the Air Force wound up taking a lot of the film that I had shot, and I worked with a guy with the Air Force, and we actually put together training stuff for the Vietnamese, and then they would dub in the Vietnamese language, and it was able to really get the bug, so to speak. So when I got back into my career, back at what I considered my real career in the Northeast, when I went on to Philly and everything, I started taking lessons and just kept it up for years. And
you were taking lessons in Philadelphia?
Yeah, Philadelphia. I really got most of my training in New Jersey, right in the New York TCA, right in the middle of the mess.
Wow.
So, and my instructors were all good guys. In fact, my main instructor was the line chief for TWA. My instrument instructor was the chief pilot for DC-8 jets for Delta Airlines. So I had some good instructors.
Yeah.
And they all just happened to be neighbors,
Oh, great.
And so I feel like I got a really good background, as far as training was concerned.
What's the greatest part about being up in the air?
There are two aspects to that. One aspect is just the freedom that it gives you, because it requires your entire attention. If you have your mind on something else, don't even get on the airplane. Don't even get behind the wheel, because if you cannot devote everything you've got to what you're doing at hand, you're going to have a bad day. So what it does, it just absolutely takes your mind away from everything, no matter what it is. If it doesn't, don't fly the airplane. The other thing it does is it let's see, makes you mature in a very short period of time, because if you're not responsible and you don't pay attention to the business at hand, you're not going to be around very much longer. In other words, you've got to follow the rules, and it teaches you to follow the rules. And that's one thing I had a hard time doing growing up in a lot of ways. But that's the one thing about flying. You learn to pay attention to detail. And once you do that and you realize how much fun it can result in, getting out there and flying, taking your family with you, going to play, having the freedom to go where you want to go at any time you want to go. All of that is the one thing. But I would say that it gives you a kind of, not fearlessness, but an ability to handle fear under pressure, and at the same time turn it into a lot of fun.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I would recommend it for anybody.
I think of two of our guests over the last 6 months, Ed Young from Florence and Phil Levinas from Sumter, both who fly for different reasons, one for convenience of getting places, and the other one talking about the experience of flying from the PD to the beach and seeing the land mature, seeing the crops change.
Yeah.
Hearing him talk about that, Ed Young talk about that, is such a, not to take anything away from Phil Levinas, but that experience, it must be powerful.
It is. I guess I was a little different pilot in a way, is that I was fascinated with the whole, I don't want to say scientific, the physical, scientific process of flying.
Right.
The physics of it. And I read Wolfgang Language's book cover to cover, and he's one of the original writers about the theory of flight and what an airplane could do, how it worked, and it went way beyond just what they teach you as a pilot. And I got involved with acrobatic flying a little bit, and was starting. You know, the guy taught me a little bit about things you could do with an airplane that nobody ever could possibly think of. That fascinated me a lot. And then when I got into instrument flying, the idea of being able to go and get an instrument clearance and fly from New Jersey to Myrtle Beach without ever seeing the ground or even bothering whether I knew where I was with respect to ground reference, to me was fascinating.
Golly.
I wished for days when it was absolutely foggy, rainy, rotten, and everything, because I wanted to fly through it and break out of the clouds 50 feet off the ground and hit the concrete, which I've done out here at the Grand Strand Airport illegally a number of times.
Oh, you didn't hear that. You didn't hear that.
Well, I'm not the only one.
Right, yeah.
The Grand Strand Airport is configured in such a way is that you don't have any towers, you don't have any mountains, you don't have anything, and you can break minimums out there. I'm not recommending that it be done, by sure, but everybody does it, you know, and it was great. I mean, I'd put my son over in the co-pilot seat there, so to speak, and I'd say, all right, when you see the rabbit, let me know. And that way, that allowed me to pay attention completely to the instruments until we were fully broken out of the cloud. Even, and the funny thing, the rabbit is that stripping light that goes, you know, real bright light. The danger of that, and I think that's what causes a lot of approach accidents, is that a pilot sees that, and because clouds aren't all even on the bottom, pieces hang down, you know, and you'll go in and out. And a lot of times they'll transition their attention from the instruments to that, and then that will disappear. And then they have to transition back to the instruments again. Then they'll see it again, and they have to transition back. And a lot of times, if they haven't had a lot of experience, next thing they know, they're in the ground. So he was able to be my other set of eyes, and he loved it. I mean,
I bet.
You know,
I bet.
So.
Golly, talking about following the rules is definitely a position.
Oh, that's what you have to do. Yeah. I think that goes for life, too. You know, in fact, we had a discussion on the radio the other day about following the rules and how so many young people, and I'm not going to take off on young people because I love them, and I've been involved in a lot of youth organizations and leadership and all that. But the one thing I think that our kids don't get a lot of is learning how to follow rules. Because I don't know who said it, but to be a good leader, you first have to be a good follower. Because in that learning the rules and learning to follow the rules, then you learn how to lead. If you don't have that early on, learning how to follow the rules, you're never going to be a leader because you're not going to know what it's all about. But that doesn't seem to be taught much anymore. I don't know. I hope it is. But.
Well, and that's a very good point. I'm trying to think who would be the good teacher of just following the rule. I mean, it
has to be done by everybody.
Right.
It has to be done by the parents and by the teachers and everything. But young folks seem to think, in many respects, and I'm sure our generation and this generation is no different than any others, and sometimes you need a wake-up call on this. But We don't seem to emphasize it enough. We don't make the good argument. We don't fight the good fight. We just kind of give it up, and we let too many situations where young people make up their own rules, and unfortunately, the wrong rules in most cases.
That's why it's so fascinating to think about you at
Yeah.
age 20,
Yeah.
following the rules, getting involved in a business. Really, I mean, just getting involved in,
Well, there was-
in a new.
Yeah.
And of course, you said the times were considerably different.
Well, yeah, they were different. Not only that, there's some kids have motivation and some don't. I just think there are better ways that we can motivate children than we have today. I would like to see more of it. I think both our teachers and our parents probably could use more help in motivating kids. I see our school systems now being more selective in the material that they're providing. They're providing better education, I think, for the kids that are motivated themselves. Greg, how many kids do you think we have here in Horry County who are really smart young kids over the years, who are just not motivated? And a lot of them, are, believe it or not, and I don't mean to criticize the school system here, but my stepson happens to be one of those people who, at 12 years old, his mother decided the school system just was not keeping up with what he had. I mean, he did everything. He knew everything. So she took him over to CCU, and they admitted him as a freshman at 12 years old.
Oh, come on.
I'm not kidding you. And he was wearing his mortarboard at graduation out here at CCU at 17. So, and he's back out there now doing more. But he's by far their youngest of that sort.
Right.
But he went through college between the ages of 12 and 17 and had no problem. He was motivated. I have to credit his mother for that because she knew how to do that. I have a very strong feeling on that, and the business of teachers and parents working together to motivate children and to talk about this idea of building leaders and following rules and everything. I know that I'm probably getting a lot of folks just laughing at me now because they're saying, well, I know Joey, and Joey's got his own idea about what the rules are. He's not going to pay attention to me, you know. But there are ways to do it. I'd just like to see more of it.
Steve, you've had such an amazing career here, and I think we've got less than 5 minutes, and we haven't even gotten. We got to New York City only en route through the training there in New Jersey on the planes, but you spent almost 20 years with NBC News.
Yeah, well, I went on to, of course, I went from San Antonio to Philadelphia, where I was the first anchorman with KYW, which was one of the first all-news operations, Westinghouse.
Westinghouse, sure.
And I was there for about almost 2 years, and then WCBS called me. They were going all-news at the time because the chairman of CBS at the time, Bill Paley, was mad because Westinghouse was doing something he wanted to do first, except they beat him to it. So he was mad.
Oh, God.
So he called the best anchor guys he could find, and some of us from Westinghouse, and he called me and said, would you come up here and help us out? And I said, sure. So I went to New York, and I was the first anchorman on the air with WCBS.
Wow.
That was the morning the airplane ran into the tower and knocked the tower down. The very first morning we were supposed to go. Yeah. So we went on the air on FM instead of AM. That was funny and expensive.
Oh, yes.
I was there for 6 years, anchoring morning with, believe it or not, Charles Osgood.
No.
Yeah, Charles and I worked out of the same desk. And as I anchored, Charles would come in and sit down and do his 5-minute piece at the table beside me. And that's precisely what he is still doing, except he's still in New York doing it, and he's still on the radio here in Myrtle Beach in that same time slot on our morning show.
On your old show, of
yeah,
course.
It's like nothing changed.
That's hilarious.
It
Does
really
he come
is.
down to visit you? Or
No, but I do talk to him a lot,
sure.
you know, and I've had him on the air here a few times.
Right.
But then after that, NBC kept pounding at me to come over there, so I went over to NBC and anchored the NBC News on the Hour, and anchored a lot of big programs and some big events. Won a number of awards at NBC and really had a great time. I mean, the Big Apple was my apple. I really loved it. I had a great time, and that's where my my family was out in Morristown, New Jersey, and it was a fairly easy commute, only 2 hours each way every day.
Oh, my Lord.
They talk about a second career. Whew. But then I kept grousing at them about wanting to go on to Washington, and so back in '83 they said, "Okay, Porter, go to Washington. By the way, drop by the White House. That's your assignment."
Oh, God.
So I was there from '83 to '92 actually. One of the longest tenures of any reporter at the White House.
The White House press corps.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then in the last 4 years, while Jim Baker was Secretary of State, actually a little bit of before that, they also asked me to be the travel pool for Secretary of State Baker. So I did, in addition to all the White House work, I did all the travel with Secretary Baker all over the world. And I've seen a lot of things. I mean, I was there when Reagan made his famous "Take This Wall Down, Mr. Gorbachev" speech. I was there, in China when we did the big negotiations with Li Peng, and with throughout the Middle East, work up to the Persian Gulf War. I was there for that. I was there during the beginning of the war. All over Africa, did all the trips to South America, plus working as an in-house grunt at the White House from morning till night. So
I can't imagine.
It was
Steve. We are going to have to get you back in another time. You're not going to believe 30 minutes is blown by.
Yeah, right.
So
well, we covered the trivial stuff anyway.
We've hit some of the trivial stuff. That's exactly right. We're going to have to get you back in very soon.
Sure.
I hope you'll give us that
Well,
chance.
I would love that opportunity because every time I give an address, along the Grand Strand, everybody wants to know, what was Mr. Reagan really like, or what was Nancy really like, what was, what really happened in Iran-Contra, and I can certainly would love to sit and talk to you about some of that stuff.
We'll look forward to that.
Okay.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. At age